To talk about electricity, vibration and healing in relation to a spiritual worldview, compounding that with functional brain healing modalities in 45 minutes is interesting. So you'll have to bear with me graciously. The slide up on the screen currently, the one on your right was the one that Lawrence showed earlier on. The one on the left is a brain cell. That's a picture of the brain. The variation is almost nil. You could literally stop the talk here and go, that's really what it's about, really. Macrocosm, microcosm. But yeah, we will move on. From an ageing and neurodegenerative perspective, there's many questions which we need to ponder as we go along our journey. So if you see that little picture there, that little guy, that's a graphic representation of some of the little things that happen inside our cells. It's like a little cosmos inside each cell. It's totally remarkable. There are 100,000 little ball transport systems carrying things, making roads, demolishing roads, fixing cells, etc. And it's all run on an electrical system. So this is basically what we'll be looking at today. An introduction, the physical etheric interface, some brain data, obviously, harmonics and healing, how we think it works, a little bit about global energy medicine and our research, and some of the issues and conclusions in relation to that. So with the brain, what are we really made of? How do we break down? Why do we break down? And what can we do to heal and recover? Our journey appears fraught with entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, that everything breaks down and moves from order to disorder, which isn't very encouraging when you're aging, to be honest. So what we had to do is to look at some of the issues relating to aging. And for those who are younger, God bless you. For those who are my age and older, we understand what's going on with this. So let's start to decipher some of it. Leonardo da Vinci said, learn how to see, realise that everything connects to everything else. Well, he certainly got it. Albert Einstein said, everything is energy. That's all there is. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy, this is physics. Contrary to what they tell you, you are not a limited material being, said Amit Goswami. He's a theoretical physicist. So let's sort of start our work. In relation to me, my introduction to energy work came about in 1973. I was 18 years old and I had a session with a healer who did energy work. He said that I was strong in the force, whatever that meant, and he would like to train me. But before he did that, he said, you need to go and tell me the difference between a tree, a rock, and a human. I didn't even understand the question, but I went around for 3 months putting my hands over things and looking quite bizarre. And then at some point, I realised that there was a pulse relating to each one, which I felt, I told him, and then he trained me for 5 years. So that was my intro. In 1980, I went to university, and on that line, we had a pain and stress management unit where we had a Faraday cage, which is completely electrically isolated, and we had multimodal biofeedback. And we would lie people down, put all these little electrode charges on them, and then I'd do energy work on them and see what happened. So that sort of was my introduction to the science of it. And then in 1983, I had a very serious car accident. This was in my final year at university, going into my final year. I had a compressed spinal cord. The nerves at C2, which is high up in the neck, were crushed. I lost 50% of the space in the spinal canal, and my x-rays in the medical museum saying I should be dead. So that was pretty encouraging. I was lying in bed and they said, you know, you'll be dead in the next 3 days. And I had to be turned by 7 people and all that. They didn't even get me a proper brace because they thought it was a waste of time to even get the brace. I was married at the time, and my cousin by marriage came in and said, oh, we need to take you to a charismatic healing meeting and you'll get healed. And I was lying in bed. I wanted to shoot him and put him in the Tower of London. You know, I'm just tired, I'm sick, I can't feed myself, I can't go to the toilet by myself, and here's this guy, and he wouldn't move. He stayed there for 2 weeks and just kept going and going and going. Really strange things happen in your brain, you know, when you're very unwell. Now, they told me that if I sneezed or coughed, I would die at that stage. So it was pretty, you know, it was pretty difficult. They said if I did survive that I wouldn't have, I would have pain for the rest of my life and I wouldn't be able to finish my degree, etc., etc. Anyway, so Yoda came into my head. If you're going to go along to this meeting, do it properly. Don't just try, right? Do or don't do. You know, it was a really good line from the movie. And I remember sitting there in the hospital just thinking, oh my God, you know, just didn't know what to do. Anyway, I go along to the meeting. There's 1,000 people there, jumping up and down, clapping, having a great time. And I'm terrified. You know, I was 27 years of age. And I had a neck brace on. And I remember thinking, you know, if you try and push me over, I'll punch your face in. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't push me, you know? Like, I've seen those meetings, and that scared me a lot. Anyway, there were no catches that night. So he comes up, puts his hand on me. I fell backwards. I cracked my head on a concrete floor, which wasn't very helpful. And then I lost consciousness for 10 minutes. And when I got up, I was healed. Now, I didn't go in there thinking that this was going to be... I didn't know what I was going for, to be honest. So that began my journey into becoming a pastor and studying spiritual things and trying to find out what on earth happened to me during that time, because not everyone gets healed. So that was sort of my interesting space to open up to all of this. So let's look at this. So when you look at the whole thing, like, you know, Lawrence has just opened this whole enormous thing here. You know, what we see is this little bit in the middle, you know, like we're there, which is pretty cool. And some people can see a little bit outside because they have some deeper skilling, because they have tuned themselves into that and do a bit wider. But really, in relation to all that is, we really don't see very much at all. If you look at the scale of an atom is to a penny. No, that's an Australian penny. I thought I'd do an Australian one just for fun because I'm in England. As the penny is to the moon. So if someone dropped the penny on the moon and dug it deep and you had to try and find it, that's the relationship to a hydrogen atom to a penny. So Nikola Tesla, who started AC current and was a pretty amazing fella, he said, every particle in the universe is bathed in a sea of ether. It is the cause of every magnetic field, which is reasonably obvious. So matter, in all of its forms, has chemical and vibratory attributes. We all know that. We've all studied that, and that's a normal thing. But matter can be charged with energy orchestrations, and I would suggest that the energy orchestration from that violin charged us a few minutes ago, remarkably. And that's what music can do. It's a vibration and it charges it. But also can magnetism, sound, thinking and believing can charge that as well. So recognising that we're always being charged. If we spend 10 minutes or half an hour or 2 hours in meditation and the rest of our time is spent in negative confront with family or whatever, we're not really being charged very well. So this is this whole paradigm of our life is bathed in this charging atmosphere, and it's up to us to try and create the environment where that works a little bit better. So the human being is a mystery within a mystery within a mystery. We do not understand anything about the brain at all. The universe is a living, stable organism, electrical in nature and function, as is the brain. That's all. It's the bridge between the material knowledge of man, this is what we're looking at, and the science of the initiates. It's quite remarkable. And that represents the interconnectedness of all life. Now, what we've had a problem from science to try and understand was how the physical etheric interface actually works. Because we know that healing can happen. I've had a healing. My x-ray still says I'm dead, which is amusing. But you know, we haven't ever understood those processes. So that was one of the things that I began looking at in my search. So to be able to partake in any way into the higher spiritual levels requires harmonic upskilling at levels only rarely seen in our current stage of spiritual enlightenment. Some people can, some people have trained and done wonderful work and have upskilled, but it's not always the way it is. So when things happen from people that are upskilled, Arthur C. Clarke, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. When you really understand what's going on, science, we will connect the dots. We'll find out what's going on. It is electrical in nature. There is an entity behind all this. There is a wisdom behind it all. And you can't all just do it from the point of gravity. I agree. But the problem is, sometimes people see things and they go, it's sort of like, wow, magic, how did it work? Well, my deal is to go, well, why on earth did I get healed? How did I get healed? Because people said, you're a big man of faith. And I got put on platforms all around the world and they just went, oh my God, this guy is incredible. And it was rubbish, because I wasn't at all. It was just some strange thing that happened to me and I didn't really understand what it was. So when you're looking at the physical etheric interface, you're looking at this energy which goes from the ether into the subtle body and directly affects the DNA. Okay? So trying to work out that process has been, I guess, the joy of the last few years of my body, my life. The etheric body in the meridian lines. Dr. Kim Bong-han in 1960 proved that the meridian system is the etheric interface. That's what he came out with the statement with. Dr. Zheng of Langzhou University also measured the flow of qi from the human body. And not everyone's human energy field pulses at the same rate. We all pulse differently. That was sort of an interesting find. And the Shanghai Atomic Nuclear Institute, whatever that is, they confirmed his study, which is sort of interesting. So it would appear that our fundamental vibrations are all different. Okay? Now, if I got a jug of water, gave you each a glass, poured the water out, and you held it for 2 minutes, and then we took one drop from each one and put it on a slide and put it in a freezer, and then blew up all of those little frozen droplets, the crystallization would be totally different for each and every one of us because your energy is different. Now, that's quite remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable. If we then did that tomorrow, whole fresh glass of water, all of our little crystalline structures will be slightly different, but mine would be similar to me and Chris's will be similar to Chris, Lawrence, etc., etc. And it's because we are all different. Now, that vibration that we are emitting, whether that is tuning our chakras at the time of our birth because the planets are in alignment that way and that's how we get tuned, I don't know. But it is certainly a fascinating thing that we're all so totally and fundamentally different, and we can literally prove that now, which is great. The other one is that the biomagnetic human energy field extends indefinitely. Now, we know that because there was a study in Russia where they got a male and a female rabbit and they made lots of little rabbits. And they got the male and the female and they put them in an underground laboratory, and then they electrically isolated them and they put the little babies on a submarine and took them 500 miles out to sea. And they put electrodes in the brain of the mother and the father rabbit, and then at specific times they killed the babies on the submarine. At the exact time on a nuclear clock, on an atomic clock, there was a stress signal in the brain of the mother. There was nothing in the brain of the father, bless. Whatever. But it's sort of interesting in that the ones that do the creating and the birthing process are totally connected and it never leaves you. Right? Now, the same thing happens with humans, Guys can be trained to do that, and that's part of our skilling that we do, which is great. But for women, it's just part of who you guys are. You are so electrically connected to every one of your progeny and to everyone in the back of your family, right? Which is pretty good. So brain data. Let's look at brains. It's a supercomputer. Like, if we got the energy, if we made a supercomputer as good as our brain, and we had to fire it up with energy, it would take 3 to 4 power plants. And ours runs on 3 little blocks of chocolate. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a pretty amazing thing. And yet we can't remember phone numbers. And yet we read a book and can't retain wolf. Do you know what I mean? It's quite remarkable. A 20-year-old average brain has around 176,000 kilometres or 109 miles of axons in your brain. So that would go around the world 4.5 times in one brain. Your eyeballs are a direct physical extension of your brain. So if your brain's fatigued, you can see it straight away. Everybody knows that. Your brain doesn't stop maturing until you're 40, right? It's interesting. Some people a little later. Women basically mature by age 32. This is science, by 32. Guys by age 43. That's probably no news to anyone. But anyway, that's what we do. Your brain is 75% water with the consistency of tofu. It's great. So even though we see those people holding brains and go, oh my God, like, it's just hard stuff, it's not hard at all. It's really funny. It's the most complicated thing in the universe, okay? We know more about stars exploding billions of light years away than we do about the brain, which is quite fascinating, really. We know, physically nothing. There are 100,000 chemical reactions occurring in your brain every second. Every second. Right? Now, considering that all that has to go through electrically gated channels, and that's got to be controlled by something, that's pretty outrageous. It's amazing. Your brain consists of 100 billion neurons. Okay, now, great. Everyone goes, oh, that's really nice. I have no idea what 100 billion means. If you get an Olympic swimming pool, some statistician pulled this one out. I don't know where they got it, but anyway. If you get an Olympic swimming pool, like that, and fill it with marbles, like it's 50 metres long and 25 metres wide and 3 metres deep, that would hold about 1 billion marbles. So someone said, right? Fascinating. So you would need 100 swimming pools, Olympic swimming pools, full of marbles to do the number of neurons in your brain, which is a lot. If you wanted to then look at the synapses in your brain, because a synapse is between 1,000 and 10,000 per neuron, so that could be up to 1 quadrillion, you would need 10,000 times 100 swimming pools with 1 billion marbles in it, right? Just to get some idea of the scale. And then we go, I can't remember a phone number. Like, really? It's crazy. What's the problem? We don't teach people how to use their brain. We just don't. It's crazy. The frontal lobe is responsible, this is here, for problem solving and decision making. The limbic cortex is for regulating emotions. And both of those are bigger in women. No surprise, right? Which is fun. Women also have 10 times more connective tissue, which is the white stuff in the brain, than men. 10 times. So guys, don't get frustrated. We look at something and go, yep, go now, bang. And women go, hang on a minute. What about this, and this, and this? It's the way you're wired. And this, and this. And you're going, oh my God, just buy it, you know? But what about the stuff, right? That's connecting stuff, okay? All the marriages out there. Okay, healing and harmonics. So space is a virtual vacuum. In a virtual vacuum, there is no sound. but there is frequency, and frequency responds to sound. We can turn it into sound. So NASA recorded the frequencies of all of the planets via the Voyager when it went screaming past them, which is really cool. And they've got the sound, and it's called the Symphonies of the Planets, and they've got it on YouTube, which is fabulous. Like, it's a really, really interesting thing. And they were really excited, and then they worked out that plasma waves, the thing that holds the whole thing together, sort of is like a rhythmic cacophony. It's this deep drone-type sound underneath it, which you can pick up as well. So you can have this drone, and you can have this amazing, things coming out, and they just went, oh my God, aren't we so smart? I mean, seriously, that is just very cool. Well, it was, except that's the plasma wave thing. Music of the spheres has been written about from the ancients forever. Okay? So Pythagoras wrote about it 550 BC. Go NASA. Do you know what I mean? Like, a lot of the things that are coming into reality now have been written about because people picked it up. They talked about the notes. They knew the notes of the spheres. They talked about the harmony of the spheres. Okay? So this is Albert again. Concerning matter, we've been all wrong. What we've called matter is energy, whose vibration has been so lowered as to be perceptible to the senses. There is no matter. A hydrogen atom, which 40% of your body is hydrogen, okay? If the nucleus of a hydrogen atom was the size of a basketball, which it's not, but if it was, the electron ring would be 20 miles away. Okay? So, and the middle part of that is a vacuum. So if I tried to sell that to you, and I get this really, really cool thing, right, here's a basketball, and there's a ping pong ball 20 miles away, yahoo, and there's nothing in the middle, you go, are you serious? Like, if we collapsed that down to matter, right, that's 0.0000001%. So if we could get a little machine and hit Lawrence and go bzzz, and get rid of his vacuum, or just of his hydrogen, he'd disappear. Right? So we are absolute pure energy. Like, when people die, we get our little bag of stuff, but that would disappear too, because it's not that. We're pure energy. DNA. We talked about DNA. In 2000, initial results from the Human Genome Project, which was at the time the most expensive project in the world, confirmed that 97% of the DNA, the 3.2 billion bases, had no apparent function. Well, that was very clever, wasn't it? That was great. The fabulous researchers, yes, it's all for nothing, we only use, which is just stupid. Anyway, it took a little while. A few years later, they produced a stunning inventory of previously hidden switches, signals and signposts embedded like ruins throughout the entire length of the human DNA. So it actually is important. Surprise, surprise. But there's a second layer, because everyone talks about the double helix and the telomere on the end, which is your timing code of your DNA, which is really, really important. But it's also the fact that it's the way it coils, and it can coil at 720 degrees, so it can go round once and then round again. And depending on those grooves within that structure and how much it's bent, depends on the activation of the DNA. So there's two ways of information loading within that. And it can distort up to 220, 720. This is a computer graphic of the crystalline structure of DNA. So we have our DNA this way, right? And we then chop it in half and we go that way. So that's a crystalline shape. Very crystalline structure. Now, this is a computer graphic, obviously. What we know is that harmonic resonances create geometric form, and non-harmonic frequencies destroy geometric form and create dissonance and breakup. Okay? So part of the issue with DNA is if we're constantly getting dissonant, disharmonic frequencies into our body, it will break up the DNA, which is what aging is. But you can change that, which is pretty cool. So this is sort of how we think it all works. I think it all works. On a classical piano, when one note is struck, there are lots of harmonics in there, which we don't hear. Okay? But the harmonics are the thing that tells us that it's not Stephen talking, it's actually a violin, if you know what I mean. So all that other background stuff, even though we can't put our finger on it, it actually tells us lots of things, which is all about this harmonic resonance. So the fact that we can't hear it doesn't mean that it hasn't happened, doesn't mean it's not real, and it doesn't mean that it's not having a more global effect on us, like the violin earlier on. This is similar to the outworking of harmonics and vibration in relating to our conscious mind. They all affect it. This guy, Stephen Lahaye, he says the opening and closing of electrically gated channels could plausibly be in synchrony with a tiny voltage oscillation, a ripple voltage, superimposed on the larger voltage fluctuations. Well, yes, that's very good. It was written about 2,000 years ago. Steve, that was good. You know, tiny oscillations, you know. Like if you think of when you meditate, you change the oscillations in your brain, you change the frequency. You know, we know these things are occurring. We're doing it every day as part of our spiritual journey, but we're now actually linking it, which is really good. Yeah, it's a concept from antiquity. It has been there forever. Energy work is involved with tiny ripple oscillations that are changing things. So Gabriel Cousens said the tissues which compose our physical form are fed not only by oxygen, glucose and chemical nutrients, but also by higher vibrational energies which endow the physical form with the properties of life and creative expression, which is a wonderful, wonderful quote. So I talked about Kim Bong-han earlier on. This is what he found, right? A new tubular structure existing inside and outside of blood vessels and lymphatic vessels on internal organs and under the dermis. So this was the Meridian system, which we all sort of thought was some sort of esoteric sort of thing that really had no form. Really, no one could find it. But he found it in 1960. But then what happened is the University of Korea did a whole pile of research. We've now got better photos, like this one. That's it. That's the Meridian system. It exists. It's 1.5 nanometers, which is very, very cool. But if we go back here, the fluid extracted from the tubules, they've taken the fluid out of it. I mean, it's tiny. High concentrations of RNA, DNA, it's deoxynucleic acid, ribonucleic acid, amino acids, hyaluronic acid, nucleotides, adrenaline, cortisol, estrogen, everything. But then they said, they're not confined to the skin, but it's a concrete duct system from which liquid foams. This liquid aggregates to form stem cells. This is a Korean university. So when we're stimulating meridian lines and meridian points in the body, through energy or through needles or through whichever way we do it, it stimulates and activates stem cells around the area, which is why the healing occurs. Like this is all written in Korea, but because it's not written in normal Western medical journals because no one wants to publish it. It's sort of pretty fascinating. Then you look at body clocks. Body master clocks were noted by the Chinese thousands of years ago. Okay? Circadian rhythms are controlled by a group of nerve cells in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and that contains 20,000 nerve cells and is located in the hypothalamus. Yeah, okay, that's exciting. And there's books about the timing of things, and we're sort of getting to the point where we sort of basically understand that. Except there was a fantastic study in Birmingham, because Western medicine's still a little bit. It's called chronobiology. It's still a little bit meh, you know. It's a little bit off the main pedestal. They got 300 people over the age of 65, and they gave them flu injections. One group they gave 9 till 11 in the morning, and the other group they gave 3 till 5 in the afternoon. And when they came back a month later, the people that had it done at 9 and to 11 in the morning had a much higher antibody count than the ones that had it at 3 to 5 in the afternoon. So if you're going to have a flu injection, don't go and do it in the afternoon. Do you know what I mean? There's lots of this research now. The body is timed. It is a time clock. The Chinese organised it a long time ago, they worked it out. This guy, Nordenstrom, this guy's remarkable, remarkable fellow. He was chairman of the Nobel Committee for the Prize of Medicine. He used electricity to shrink cancer cells, right? So a lot of women with breast cancer, he did, and a lot of lung cancer. And he would get a wire and he would poke it down into the tumour, and he would put one outside and he'd send a signal through, and he would destroy the cancer. Now, he's one of the most, well, certainly well known. He was absolutely at the top of his game. He was the chairman of the Nobel Prize for Medicine. He noted that there were differences in electrical potential creating electrical fields throughout the body, and that was what he was working with. Dr. John Austin from Columbia Presbyterian Medical School stated that Nordenstrom's credentials are absolutely impeccable and in fact totally extraordinary, which is why he was the chairman of the Nobel Prize. But his work is totally ignored by the medical fraternity. And one of the sort of problems, I guess, associated with that is he can't even be published anymore, right? Now, all his results are quite incredible, right? So he published a book rather than trying to publish in journals, and his book's 600 pages long, and if you've got about 18 months of your life to spare, it's a good read. It's incredibly complicated, but remarkable. And he's getting remarkable results by modulating electrical fields, which is great. Okay. Will Tiller, right? He's from Stanford. He's a great guy. If you look at the latent energy within one hydrogen atom, now we've worked out that we're 40% hydrogen. Our brain is 50% hydrogen, right? The vacuum within one hydrogen atom is 10 to the 94 grams per cubic centimetre, whatever that means, right? But what it breaks down to is that there's enough energy in one hydrogen atom to be equal to 1 trillion times all of the mass of all of the energies of the stars and planets out to 20 billion light years in one hydrogen atom, which is similar to what you're doing, because Lawrence's thing was like 112 volts produced this remarkable thing, and that's exactly what happens with the hydrogen atom. Now, if consciousness even allows us to control a small fraction of that, we'll think of the possibilities. It's amazing. You know, I haven't got any energy. You consist of a powerhouse of electricity, which you can activate any time you like. So healing energy is magnetic. Okay, we know that. The Japanese have also repeated studies and shown that their martial artists and Qigong and meditators have about 100 times more energy coming from their hands than normal people. That's been proven forever. Dr. Zimmerman was using a superconductive quantum interface device, SQUID, demonstrated significant increases in the intensity of magnetic fields by healers' hands, and that was confirmed by the Japanese. This guy, Luc Montagnier, he was a Nobel Prize winner. He was a French virologist and joint recipient of the 2008 Nobel Prize in Physiology for his discovery of the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV. He worked out that DNA strands in separate test tubes, bang, we're separated by hunks of glass, right, communicated at low frequencies and even exchanged nucleotidal inflammation. It's pretty cool. They had a conversation with each other between test tubes and exchanged information. And it was at very, very low frequency. But it only occurred when they gave them the Schumann resonance, which is 7.83 hertz. Okay? So when you look at 7.83 hertz heartbeat Schumann resonance, and there's lots of stuff on YouTube, and it's fabulous, and everyone loves it, it's great. The problem's this. The Russian Space Observing System in June 2014 got activity up to 8.5, and subsequently it's gone to 16.5, and on the 31st of January 2017, it got to 35 hertz. Interesting. So perhaps it's an awakening. You know, I mean, this is just a thought from a few abstracted people who sort of play with frequencies. But if those frequencies were human rather than the planet, then 7.8 is sort of like relaxed, dreamy, idling. 8.5 to 16 is like a slightly more alert frequency, slowly waking up, and 12 to 15 really is the ideal state of awakened calm. Now, when we get to 35, which is what's been recorded in January of 2017, maybe that's just going, and this is all just whatever, but maybe that's going into a whole new realm that we can open up in our brain. We don't know that. Normally on a human that would mean that you were in a highly, highly, highly stressed state, but maybe there's something above that we just don't know. But it's interesting to actually look at what's happening with the Schumann resonance. So Will Tiller, who's a great bloke, he talks about positive and negative space-time and how these things may be influencing what's going on in our body with healing, right? So it's all sort of coming to a little bit of a get-together. So what he says is this: positive space-time is the realm of physical matter and the physical world, where electricity is the primary force. There's a tending power towards entropy. Things break down. Velocities are limited to the speed of light, and like repels and opposite attracts. That's where we are right now. In his negative space-time, he says this is the realm of subtle substance, spirit, and the metaphysical world, where magnetism is the primary force. There's a tendency to syntropy, so healing, negative entropy. Velocities are in excess of the speed of light, and like attracts and opposites repel. So it's very, very interesting because normal science doesn't look this way. It's believed that through our own unique physical etheric interface of negative space-time that we're ultimately influenced by our higher energetic connections. This is the way that the theory goes, okay? And that works via deltronic wave flow particles. So he says that the magnetoelectric force is carried by deltronic particles and waves that constitute the subtle energies that bring order into the physical world. And they come in through the etheric interface, into the meridian system, and therefore into our DNA and change us that way, okay? So we actually have, whether it's right or wrong, we have some sort of basic understanding of how it could work now from a scientific point of view. So negative space-time counteracts the effects of the second law of thermodynamics, which is entropy. And for me, when I was healed, inverted commas, it was an instant bang, there it was. So 1 minute I couldn't move my neck and I was in pain and I was going to die, and the next minute I was okay. So it is proposed that our consciousness is the internal experience of these deltronic magnetoelectric fields, which we can pick up because this is a great big living entity that we sit inside. And through study, service and meditation, that's how we get in touch with that, gradually and gracefully opening the doors. Okay, harmonic resonance theory. Oh, we're nearly there. Music, vibration, air, ears, brain, sound registered. There are multiple auxiliary frequencies being produced at the same time along with the main note. These are harmonic resonances. So the universe is the ultimate radio and we each vibrate at our own frequency. So we are always picking up things. We're not necessarily dialing into the station, but it's always coming to us. And as we elevate our frequencies, as we change and meditate and grow and begin to pick up higher frequencies, then we will understand what they are. If I got a radio in this room, I could pick up every radio station just about in the world. But it doesn't appear that they're here, but they are. And it's the same thing with us. So what a guy called Dr. Holland did with resonant frequencies, he realised he was a conductor. He conducted at Carnegie Hall. He taught at Skidmore College for 27 years, and he liked physics as well. He realised that when you sing, you could fracture a glass, which can happen, right? I don't know whether anyone's seen it, but opera singers do it just for fun at parties. Whatever. So he thought, well, just maybe, perhaps we could get a cell, because a cell is a crystalline structure, and perhaps we could find the resonant frequency and smash the cell, which is sort of a bit unusual. So he got a microscope and he got a paramecium, which is a single-celled politician. And they found these different frequency codes, which they were sort of putting on it, and he tried all sorts of different things. And then he got an initial frequency, and then he got to the first harmonic, second, third, fourth. When he got to the 11th harmonic, the wall of the cell fractured and it dissipated, right? So that was great. You can kill a paramecium. Yes. Not a lot of clinical advent in that. But one of his ex-students was a cancer researcher. And he said to him, if you can do it with the paramecium, perhaps you can do it with cancer cells. And so they started doing some interesting work. That's our little paramecium. And he did it with leukemia cells, right? And he found the resonant frequency. It took him 3 months. Found the resonant frequency. And he started breaking up these leukemia cells. And then he did with pancreatic cells as well. Started doing it. Now, one of his aims is to have areas with children that have cancer that they can sit in rooms and we can play music to them with these frequency codes, and we can get rid of the cancer that way. He has no funding. Fascinating. So we also understand that sound causes matter to form. We all know that, right? So if we have something like this, it's water, and we play a pure tone into it, it will create a perfect geometric form which will last. If we play a tone which is a non-perfect harmonic, it will not create a perfect geometric form, and it will in fact collapse a perfect geometric form, okay? So we're looking at that whole thing of harmonics. So when we had the thing on the Sanskrit earlier on, which was just wonderful, it was lovely, the intonation and the sound is the most important thing. It's harmonically generated things. So when you look at Barbara Hero, she did the work on looking at the geometric forms and all that sort of stuff with harmonics. But this is a male and a female voice rendered by a thing called a cymoscope, singing the same note, right? But it's just amazing. Like the female form is like, look at this, it's like birthing something out of the middle of it. It's just the most incredible. We've got some amazing science around nowadays, right? So we can see whether we're creating perfect harmonic forms because we can actually see the photos now, which is absolutely unreal. The three basic sounds, this is the Sufis, okay? R, A, I, and U. They are what the Sufis call the universal harmonic constant, and they're used in all mystical paths that utilise sound. It is their belief that as one masters the sounds, they will ascend the stairway to heaven. But you can't just sit there and go, A, I, U, like it's not that. It's not like that at all. It's a deeper understanding. It's really understanding how to say, how to do the vibration. It's all vibrational based. So Edgar Cayce predicted that the medicine of the future would be sound. Rudolf Steiner predicted that pure tones will be used for healing before the end of this century. Nostradamus foretold the healing of cancer through pure tones. And the Hopi American Indian prophecy tells of the coming of the rainbow people through the keepers of the crystal bowls. So sound or vibration or harmonic resonance is the carrier of the wave of consciousness and has the power to heal. So as we are elevating our consciousness in our meditation and what we're doing through the school and through the trust, we are the ones who can heal people as well, because we're elevating our consciousness and we can send that out to people, which is really, really important. So global, this is the company that I started. So this is sort of coming back to where we all initiated. The body's natural energies are the key to health, vitality, well-being and function. Energy medicine is a science that seeks to direct these energies for well-being and quality of life. So, I'm now old. My X-ray still says I'm dead. And I'm doing really interesting things because I don't have a sore neck. I don't have anything, which is really cool. So that's what triggered a lot of this. The brain research was by a guy called Keith Salshiner, who played in the D League of the NBA in America. Great basketball player. He came out to Australia. I do a lot of work with elite athletes. He went over the back of someone like Steph Curry did there, hit his head on the floor and got concussed really badly. And the coach said to me, "I want him back on the court." And I went, "Well, no, concussed, can't do it, just can't do it." And he was really pushing because he needed this guy on the court. So we've designed this thing called an E-cell, which is that little thing there. So I had one of those. I'm thinking, stick it on his head. Why not? What could possibly happen? Heaven knows. Anyway, so I put it on his head, and about 3 minutes later, he said, "I'm feeling much better." And we tested him, and he passed the concussion test. And I went, "Oh, okay." And then he went on the court, and he played really well. And a friend of mine is an international professor at the University of Pierre and Madame Curie in Paris. And I rang her, and I went, "Rachel, something really weird has happened here, And I told her what happened, and she said, "Well, let's start doing some research and find out what on earth's going on." And that started the brain research. That's how it all sort of began. But when you look at magnetotherapy, Yellow Emperor's Book of Internal Medicine talked about it 2000 BC. Paracelsus, 1500 AD, Tesla. We're a long way down the track. It takes us a long time to get things together, hey? But we certainly do in the end. Alexander Gurvich discovered that our body's cells can communicate certain bits of information with each other, even if they're physically separated by a plate of glass. That's pretty clever. Amazing. Low energy frequencies. And then Laurie, the reinforcement of cell oscillation with radio waves increased their ability to fight off and damage disease. So these machines were made, And this was the guy who kicked off a lot of this work with Tesla as well. He's one of his initial early machines I've got. It's a remarkable piece of equipment. And then people like Rife and Anton Priori, who did some amazing work in Paris during the war, all these other people started doing this incredible work. But what happened is when you take a pulsed electromagnetic field and use it on the brain, you change it and you call it repetitive transmagnetic signaling, rTMS. So around the world, the way that most of the researchers were doing it was they would put a signal in of 2 to 3 Tesla, which is fairly high. Has anyone been in an MRI machine? Who's been in an MRI? A few people. It's noisy. It's horrible, isn't it? You get this and you've got headphones on and it's like, So most people use that frequency, okay? And they put headphones on and they use a frequency that's strong enough on the brain to actually create a reflex of the thumb, which is pretty big. So that's how they do it. They use one of those little machines and they just bash away there. The Cochrane Library, Cochrane is a non-profit, non-government organisation that looks at and validates evidence-based research. They're fantastic. It's probably the best group in the world. They're just wonderful. So they looked at all the work on rTMS on the brain. And they said basically that it doesn't do any harm, but it in fact doesn't do any good, right? So the fact that you're not killing people is great, but you need to do some benefit. But everyone in the study was using between 2 and 3 Tesla. We were using 7 millihertz. We were using 7.07 millitesla. So ours was 3,500 to 4,000 times smaller in voltage. And everyone looked at us and said, "What, you're kidding? You're homeopathic. It's just stupid, right?" But this is sort of how our research went, because we followed the biomimicry model. And it was a leap of faith, yeah. It's a leap of faith. We had to put in a whole pile of money and play leaps of faith, and that's what we got. So with the research, we got some little mice. All right, I've got a little fella. And we investigated whether neuronal activity induced by pulse fields could alter brain structure and function in the mice, because you're not allowed to play with humans, right, at that level. They had disorganised retinocollicular circuitry, and visual motors. Basically, they couldn't see and they couldn't motor plan very well, which is a factor of ageing anyway, but they just couldn't do that. So what happened is we corrected their abnormal neurons response. We removed the inaccurate ectopic axon terminals, so the ones that didn't work very well, we removed. We improved the structure and functional organisation of their retrocollicular projections and restored normal tracking in the mice. So he was a happy little fella, right? So that was extremely cool. And when we went to a lot of these brain conferences around the world, Harvard started copying us and doing other things as well, which is really cool. So, issues. So what's sort of going on? Have we somehow tapped into this very low frequency? When you're picking up frequency codes that are that small, there's all sorts of base frequencies going in that we have no idea what they're on. We don't even know what we're putting in there, to be honest. I wish we did, but we don't. So we don't know whether it's actually the coding that we did or it's somehow some fractal of that which is actually going through and changing it, but whatever, it's changing the brain, which is cool. So are we opening up Meridian channels somehow? Are we modulating gated channels? Are we encouraging ionic migration? Are we affecting the telomeres, the DNA cross bridges? Have we factored chronobiology into all of this? No. Well, to understand the question, we've got to do this. So what we need as a team is this: neuroscientists, nanotechnicians, therapists, mathematicians, physicists, everybody. Problem with that? Costs a lot of money, right? A lot of money. But we need all that scientific personnel to really understand what on earth is going on. There is a global lack of money in research. If anyone's involved with, is anyone else involved with research here at all? There's a lack of money, eh? Like serious lack of money. And the problem with some of the medicine stuff is that the commercialisation of research has made it, well, the best example I could give you is that we have made slight progress in the petrol combustion motor since the Model T Ford. Slight more miles per gallon, but the reality is that's absolute rubbish because you can run them on water, but it would change the global economics, and it's a $1.2 trillion industry and no one wants to play with that. That's why you still spend $100 a week on your car for petrol. So it's not that there aren't better alternatives, it's that the global big pharma is so big that if you can, not being horrible, if you can heal cancer by playing them a song with a frequency code in it, you're not going to go very far. So what I realised is I had to try and find a philanthropist who would be willing to invest a significant deal of money to make this happen. And fortunately, we're now taking hold of that, and I'll be meeting this guy when I get back to Perth and go to Sydney, and we should be starting that very, very soon, which is fabulous, totally fabulous. So, once again, here it all comes down to this, really. It all comes down to electricity, and we're just modulating electrical gates. The faux hut, it's the personified electrical vital body, the transcendental binding unity of all cosmic energies on the unseen and the manifested planes, These are the things that are touching us from a science point of view now. To gain a more detailed understanding of how this affects life on more of a universal level, I'd refer people to Lawrence, because that's what he does, right? I love talking to Lawrence. I've only known him for a few days, but it's been fabulous. So he does that, and I sort of go in a little bit tighter. I believe this concept traverses the very essence of who and what we are as spiritual entities on our own unique evolutionary journey. I believe that the fundamental principle of syncope, which is this negative space-time thing, in the determination of reversing the issue of disease within the confines of our physical transport system, is a very, very important thing for us to do scientifically, and we have to do it scientifically. It's got to be absolutely knocked up, and it's going to cost a lot of money, but I think it'll be really, really good for the planet. And I believe that it is the active, intelligent, electrical principle underlying the active phenomena of healing in all of its myriad parameters, which we are now beginning to substantially validate, which is a wonderful thing. So that's where we're doing. I have spent my life since I was 18 on this journey, and people say, "Oh, you've been doing it for a few years." No, I've been doing it for about 40 years, and I love it. And it's it's something that can help change the planet, which I think is really amazing. So rather than the end, it's sort of let there be light. Thank you.